Hello everyone and welcome to a brand new episode of Midlife Crisis, the show where I talk about every major DC crossover event in chronological order. This week we are continuing our look through the miniseries tie-ins to Countdown to Final Crisis. If you haven't watched my videos on Countdown to Final Crisis yet, I highly recommend going back and checking those out before watching this video, just because a couple of events from that video will pop up in this, because this miniseries ties into the story. The miniseries that we are covering this week is Lord Havok and the Extremists. If you don't know what they are, Lord Havok and the Extremists are a group of supervillains introduced by Keith Giffen in the Justice League Europe series, which was a spin-off to Justice League International, the series that came out in the 80s. Lord Havok and the Extremists come from Earth 8, and the idea behind Earth 8 is that it is a pastiche of the Marvel Universe. So every character that exists in Earth 8 is a reference to a Marvel character. The Extremists are a reference to Marvel villainous groups like the Cabal. They consist of Lord Havok, who is a reference to Doctor Doom, Tracer, who is a reference to Sabretooth, Gorgon, who is a reference to Dr. Octopus, Dreamslayer, who is a reference to Dormammu, and Dr. Destiny, who is a reference to Magneto. And they all share basically the same powers as those characters. Now, unlike the Extremists, the heroic group on this Earth has changed their names practically every single time this Earth has showed up in a story. It's never been consistent. I will be referring to them by their name in this miniseries, which is the Meta Militia. So don't go saying, oh, they're the Revengers. That's Multiversity. That's a different version of Earth 8. On this Earth 8, they are called the Meta Militia. The Meta Militia consist of Blue Jay, Americommando, who is obviously a Captain America reference, Bowman, Tin Man, Ongina, who is a reference to Thor, and Silver Sorceress, which is obvious, it's Scarlet Witch. There's also another heroic team on this Earth called the Zen Men, which are supposed to be references to the X-Men, but we only really get to know one of the members in this miniseries, and that's One Eye, who is obviously a Cyclops reference, and that's all the characters out of the way. So without further ado, let's get into this miniseries where we will get to explore this Earth more, learn more about the backstories of some of these characters that have never been explored before, and also see how this series ties directly into Countdown itself. So please like and subscribe, and let's get straight into Lord Havok and the Extremists. Issue 1 begins immediately by setting the scene for the current state of Earth 8. In a narration by Lord Havok, he explains that the government has enacted a Metahuman Registry Act, and when they register with the government, they become a member of their Meta Militia. But what they don't tell the metahumans that don't register is that they will be arrested and taken to concentration camps and even executed. So Lord Havok brings together Gorgon, Dr. Diehard, Dreamslayer, and Tracer to create the Extremists and serve as what he believes to be the freedom fighters that will free the nation of Angor, which is representing the United States of America. They even call it the United States of Angor. The only member of the Extremists who objects is this villain called Carney, who Lord Havok kills. Carney seems to be a reference to Arcade. He appeared briefly in the Justice League Europe arc that the Extremists appeared in during the 90s. So yeah, that character just immediately killed off with 0 lines. And so Lord Havok announces that the Extremists are going to war with the government. We then meet Tin Man for the first time, who is the president of the United States of Angor. He talks about how they've almost eradicated all supervillains, and he says almost because the Extremists still exist. And that's when Lord Havok shows up and kills him. And Lord Havok said, "We will continue killing every single person who stupidly stands up and becomes president." They'll call us terrorists, but we are the freedom fighters and we're fighting for your safety. This announcement is being watched by Americommando, who has now just become the president of Angor after Tin Man's death. He's currently sleeping with the Silver Sorceress, who is the wife of Blue Jay, who is Americommando's best friend. So Americommando sent Blue Jay off on a mission in Slovakia and told Silver Sorceress to stay behind so that he could sleep with her, because he's a terrible friend. He's definitely painted as a terrible version of Captain America in this, but at least he's nowhere near as bad as Soldier Boy from the Boys comics. While he and the Sorceress talk to each other in bed, he receives a notification on his receiver, and when he turns it on, he realizes that Slovakia is being attacked by Lord Havok. In Slovakia, we get to see Lord Havok talk to the leader of the country, and he wants them to follow his rule, but they refuse and say as long as the royal family is alive, you will never have control of Slovakia. Lord Havok's like, yeah, I know. And he kills them, the entire family. He kills the king, he kills the queen, and then he hesitates, but he also kills the son as well. That moment of hesitation shows that there's some complexity to Lord Havok, and that he's not horrifically evil. One of his robots notices that he hesitated. It's like, may I ask why? Lord Havok's like, no, and destroys the robot. As for the rest of you, initiate the protocols we discussed. Now that I have a new base of operations, inform the... Many pardons, my lord. We are picking up a signal of the security monitors, something that requires your immediate attention. You know the procedure. Yes, my lord. Lord Havok begins sending out calls to all of the members of the Extremists, so we get to see them doing their day-to-day stuff. Dreamslayer gets called by his cult to appear in front of them, and they hear a phone ringing. They're like, is that your phone? No, it's not my phone. I wouldn't interrupt this whole thing. Turns out it's Dreamslayer's phone, which is pretty funny seeing a demonic god answer his phone and be like, hey, what's up? We get to see the Zen Men briefly, as we're introduced to them, and they are apparently led by Dr. Destiny on Earth 8. That'd be like if Magneto became the leader of the X-Men, which has probably happened at some point, given how many comics of those there are. He seems to be in a relationship with a character similar to Storm. They don't reveal her name, but I'm guessing she's supposed to be an analog of Storm. But then he gets a call from Lord Havok and has to go and deal with that business. We then get to see Gorgon's life outside of being a supervillain, where he is a surgeon who experiments on metahumans using radiation. Turns out you can kill metahumans with large doses of radiation. It's also revealed that Gorgon can turn into a human, which is something that was not revealed until this point. The doctors that he's working with receive a call to go and get Wangina's help because Slovakia is being attacked, and so Wangina arrives. It's like, you need to get your Meta Militia members and go to Slovakia to see what's going on. And Gorgon obviously gets a call from Lord Havok and goes off to deal with that, and he slowly starts turning back into Gorgon, so he has to get out of there quickly so that they don't know who he is. We then see what Trace is up to. He's currently attacking the Belmont crime family, because he's deep in the crime society. It's one of the reasons why they recruited him into the Extremists. He kills all the members of the family and comes face to face with Paul, their leader, I guess. He's there to find some guy called Vinny's diamonds, and Paul tells him that they're in the cabinet, and so Tracer kills him, retrieves the diamonds, and gets a call from Lord Havok. Turns out the reason Lord Havok is calling them is because the challengers have arrived, which consist of Kyle Rayner, Donna Troy, Jason Todd, and Bob the Monitor. If you want to know more about them, you're going to have to go and watch the countdown video, because that explores this plot a lot more. The next issue doesn't involve it very much. In issue 2 of Lord Havok and the Extremists, we get to explore the origins of Gorgon. He was hired by the government to create metahumans using gene-altering technology. During one of his experiments, many years ago, his superiors rushed him too much, causing the entire experiment to explode in his face, literally, destroying the entire room. But he's found by a woman named Susan. Dr. Mortimer immediately falls in love with Susan and they become work partners. The Extremists come together in order to deal with these characters that have arrived on their Earth: Donna Troy, Kyle Rayner, and Jason Todd. They believe that they may be members of the Meta Militia, but we as the reader know that they are not members of the Meta Militia. We do get to see them briefly fighting Lord Havok's robots, but we don't see Donna Troy, Bob the Monitor, or Kyle Rayner for the rest of this book. We do see Jason Todd again. We don't see them. To see what happened to them, you'd have to go and watch the countdown video that I did. Lord Havok also just doesn't have any robots in Countdown to Final Crisis, so this is our first example of a continuity error within this book, and there are plenty more that come up within this very issue. I'd go as far as to say as this issue is just not canon to Countdown to Final Crisis at all, and therefore this book isn't canon to Countdown to Final Crisis. In the past, Susan and Dr. Mortimer continue their experiments together, where they are introduced to a man known as Dr. Leonard Grant, who is Wandjina. He can transform into Wandjina, similarly to how Thor originally had a form as just a regular doctor, and then he would transform into Thor. A love triangle unsurprisingly forms between these three characters, leaving Dr. Mortimer feeling incredibly jealous. Dr. Mortimer then recounts a night where he received a call from Susan because they were supposed to go out and see a performance together, but Susan said that she couldn't go because she was spending the night working on a new experiment with Wandjina. And Dr. Mortimer says that that was the last thing he remembered that night. We then cut back to the present, where it's revealed that Jason Todd has killed a member of the Extremists called the Barracuda. This is shown a lot more in Countdown to Final Crisis, and this is an example of where the continuity just doesn't work with Countdown to Final Crisis, because in that, the moment that Jason kills Barracuda happens while Donna Troy, Kyle Rayner, and Bob the Monitor are all there. Jason Todd pretended to be on Monarch's side. He killed Barracuda in Countdown to Final Crisis and revealed that he was working with Monarch. Then a massive fight between the Extremists, Monarch, the Challengers, and the Crime Society happens in Countdown to Final Crisis. And during that fight, the Challengers, including Jason Todd, are teleported away to another part of Earth 8, which is where it's revealed that Jason Todd wasn't actually working with Monarch. He was just pretending. But he did kill Barracuda. That did happen. The problem is, none of the stuff that I just mentioned happens in this book. Donna Troy, Kyle Rayner, and Bob the Monitor are nowhere to be seen when Jason kills Barracuda, and for the rest of the book, Jason is seen on Monarch's side. There are also members of the Crime Society in this book that didn't even exist in Countdown to Final Crisis. There's a Green Arrow guy there and a Hawk Girl looking character. They were not there. So yeah, this is where this miniseries diverts pretty heavily from Countdown to Final Crisis to a point where it's hard to even consider it canon anymore because of how different the events are. Dr. Mortimer recounts more flashbacks where he finds Sue's body dead in her house after her neck has been broken, and he assumes immediately that it was Wandjina. And so he transforms into Gorgon in a fit of rage and heads off to go and find Wandjina and kill him. As he's attacking a bunch of government guys, a mysterious person in a green cloak approaches him and tells him that Wandjina was not responsible for killing Sue, and that the one responsible for killing her was Gorgon himself, because he has multiple personalities. He was the one that went out and saw a play with Sue. She never spent the time with Wandjina. He mentions weirdly that Wandjina is secretly gay. It's just a weird little thing in this. He's like, Wandjina's secretly gay, so there's no way he could have been hanging out with Susan. The mysterious green-cloaked figure then says that he can help Mortimer by directing his rage at someone who deserves it. It's assumed that this man is likely Lord Havok. In the present, Monarch asks Havok to join him, and Lord Havok refuses. He says no and prepares to fight Monarch and the Crime Society, and Jason Todd, I guess. In issue 3, we learn about Tracer's origins. He was originally known as Vincent Cade, a private in the army. He tried to desert the army. They found him and they were going to execute him or something. But that's when they get attacked by explosives sent by the enemy, which just destroys Vincent's arms. But it's kind of funny because his arms are gone, but the thing he complains about is the fact that he can't feel his legs. I don't know if that was a joke on purpose or if that was an art problem or something. I'm assuming it's supposed to be a joke. In the present, Lord Havok gets up in Monarch's face and says, I'm not gonna join you. What are you gonna do about it? And Monarch says, nothing. You're not ready to join me right now. But you will soon learn to share my vision. Dr. Destiny later questions Lord Havok's decision not to join Monarch, which shows that there isn't a lot of trust in Lord Havok's leadership within the Extremists, and that Dr. Destiny might start a mutiny against him. We get to see more Tracer flashbacks where he's being experimented on by Dr. Mortar, who transforms him into Tracer, like from Vincent Cade to Tracer, by giving him his abilities like metal claws and heightened senses. He's put through all sorts of experiments and completes them efficiently. Normally it's just ripping people apart. And then his biggest test comes in the form of a child who he has to kill. And we don't see it, it happens off panel, but he runs at this child because he's got a chip in the back of his neck that allows them to control him. So he doesn't want to do this, but they use the chip to force him to do it. And so the last shot we see is him running at the child, and it's presumed that he kills her off panel, which is just really sad. We immediately then cut to Vincent at a bar chillin', where he mentions that he is now a member of the Meta Militia, works alongside the Americommando. They send him out on missions to go and deal with criminals, I guess. They don't really elaborate on it much. He's being sent out on a new mission where he's sent out into the middle of the jungle with Americommando and a couple of other characters who aren't named. Tracer gets a little bit carried away and they try to stop him, but Tracer turns against his own allies and starts killing them. So Americommando is like, I'm gonna put him out of his misery because I don't want to die. But before he can kill Tracer, Tracer is saved by Lord Havok, who shoots Americommando away, pulls the chip out of Tracer's neck, and tells him to come with him. Tracer enters a nearby alleyway and is ambushed by an alternate version of the Justice League that consists of Green Sinestro, Linda Park as a Flash, Bizarra, who is a Wonder Woman version of Bizarro, her Superman, Bat Soldier, Robin Olsen, and a Zombie Gordon. They were sent by Monarch to kill Tracer, so they try to do that. They all fight him. Tracer fights back and manages to take out Zombie Gordon, but is bombarded by attacks that do a ton of damage to him. But he just kind of shakes it off, looks at him, and is like, that all you got? Impressive. They all start beating the hell out of Tracer. Bizarra grabs her lasso of truth, wraps it around his neck, and kills him. Well, it looks like it's mission accomplished, soldiers. Tracer's dead. In issue 4, the war between the Metahuman Militia and Lord Havok has begun. Being the president has pushed Americommando to a breaking point, and Blue Jay convinces him that he has to make a change and be a hero. Americommando says, "You're right. Maybe a change finally does have to be made." Meanwhile, Dr. Destiny of the Extremists is annoyed at Lord Havok because he sent all of his robot forces in to fight the Meta Militia, but hasn't gone into it himself and is instead hiding away somewhere. And he's also told the rest of the Extremists to not take part in the war, but Dr. Destiny wants to take part in the war because they all have grudges against the Meta Militia. So this is only fueling Dr. Destiny's desire to start a mutiny against Lord Havok. It's then that Dreamslayer's origins are revealed. We are introduced to a character known as Louis, who has a sister named Louise. Louise is a nun in an unnamed religion. Louis is currently in prison and wants Louise to get him out of prison so that he can show her that he is now a man of a different religion, which is called the Church of Dreamology. And he invites her to come with him to the church to see what they do there. They head to the Church of Dreamology, where it's revealed that they all worship the Dreamslayer and are going to try and summon him to the church. Louise doesn't believe that Louis' religion is good, and that upsets Louis enough that Dreamslayer appears directly to him and says that he will need Louis' help to enact his acts of vengeance. So Dreamslayer possesses Louis' body and uses Louis to destroy everyone in the church except for Louise. And Lord Havok appears before Louis and casts Dreamslayer away, stating that he will find a different host for Dreamslayer so that Louis can live a free life. And in the present, it's revealed that the current Dreamslayer is Louis' sister Louise. It's also revealed that Vincent survived his encounter with that alternate Justice League and is currently in a coma within the Extremists base, where it's revealed that Vincent and Louise are in a relationship. Meanwhile, in order to make a change, Americommando teams up with Monarch and has Monarch destroy a bunch of the Extremists' homes or places of meaning, and then blame the Extremists for it. And Blue Jay learns of this and decides that he needs to put a stop to Americommando because he's going too far now. Dr. Destiny gets rightfully upset about his home and his family being destroyed, and so he tries to take it out on Lord Havok, but Lord Havok takes him out with a plastic laser, which Dr. Destiny can't stop because he only has the power over magnetism. Lord Havok also states that the only reason he didn't kill Dr. Destiny is because they used to be close friends, and also because Dr. Destiny is going through a lot of problems right now. Lord Havok explains that the destruction of all these places was necessary, but he doesn't really explain how it was necessary. But this leads directly into Dr. Destiny's origin in issue 5, where we meet his alter ego, Hans Lecter. Hans is the leader of the protests against the Metahuman Act that the government is enacting, because he just wants peace. The Meta Militia arrive at Hans' academy to bring the Zen Men in by force, but Hans arrives and says that the Zen Men will come to them peacefully. And so Hans and his Zen Men are sent to a concentration camp where one of his students, called Jack, wants to start an uprising and escape from the concentration camp, but Hans refuses because it goes against his beliefs. It's then revealed that some of his students have started switching over to the Meta Military, like One Eye, because One Eye has a family that he cares about, so he sees it as, I have no choice but to join them because I don't want my family to be in danger. Later, one of Han's students, Anna, is killed by a Meta Militia member because he tried to force himself on her and she refused, so he killed her. And that really upsets Jack, who decides that he's going to go against Han's wishes and start an uprising. So Jack tries to attack the Meta Militia members, and they straight up kill Jack. They just shoot him. And this leaves Han speechless. But then One Eye approaches him and uses his abilities to destroy the chip that's in Han's hand that stops him from using his powers, so that Hans is free to do something about this. And so we don't get to see it, but Hans starts an uprising in the prison and helps all of his students escape, and Lord Havok comes to him and helps him as well, and that's how he gets inducted into the Extremists. It all happens off-panel. In the present, the Meta Militia, led by Americommando and Monarch, attack the Extremists' base and manage to break through their giant shield, their big force field that they've put around their base with the help of Monarch, and are preparing to run into it and kill them all. Meanwhile, Blue Jay heads back to his house with Silver Sorceress in tow because he plans on stopping Americommando, and the only way he can do that is by using his Raven armor, which is an Iron Man looking armor. He also reveals to the Sorceress that he knows about her cheating on him with Americommando, and says that when she wakes up tomorrow, there will be divorce papers on the table. It's like, wake up, what do you mean? He knocks her out with a laser, and then does this weird thing where he goes right up to her and smells her hair, and is like, damn myself for still loving you. And then he puts on the suit of armor and he flies off to go and find Americommando and stop him before he goes too far. Dr. Destiny tries to convince the rest of the Extremists to team up with him and turn on Lord Havok. But Lord Havok arrives and uses the past times where he's helped them to try and convince them to side with him and turn against Dr. Destiny. He tells them to show them his loyalty by killing Dr. Destiny, and they decide to listen to Lord Havok, and they all turn against Dr. Destiny. And Destiny's like, you idiots! You shouldn't be turning against me! You're gonna regret this! They all start attacking him, and Tracer tells Louise to become Dreamslayer, and Louise says that she can't become Dreamslayer because it's been foretold that if Dreamslayer gets summoned again, terrible things are gonna happen. But against her own will, Dreamslayer is freed, and he just incinerates Dr. Destiny. And that's when Tracer reminds Dreamslayer that they got bigger problems going on outside, because the Meta Militia are at their doorstep and are ready to try and kill them. And so, in the final issue, we learn of Lord Havok's secret origin. Alexei Nikolai, son of Kazan Nikolai, the king of Russia. Alexei was born as a deformed child, and his father was ready to throw him into a fire, but his mother saved his life because his mother actually cares about him, and she's the reason that his father doesn't kill him. And so Alexei grows up under the nurturing love of his mother and the horrible hatred of his father. And as he grows up, he learns about robotics and starts building his own robots, and also building his own robotic arms and legs for himself. But his father still sees him as demon spawn and hates his robots, so he would come in and destroy them and then try and abuse Alexei. But his mother would always get in the way. And his father is like, alright, I'll leave him alone for now, but one day he'll get what's coming to him. And that was the day his mother decided that she needed to get him out of Russia. And she did. Using his father's funds, she was able to send Alexei to the US so that he could study at college, where he learned how to create a new kind of metal that could create any form. So he was able to create like proper arms and body parts for himself that looked almost exactly like the real thing. This is also where we get to see Alexei's more sinister side start to come out when one of his college bullies starts messing around with his technology, and Alexei tries to warn him, but the metal gets stuck to this guy's face and kills him. Alexei's like, I tried to warn him, and then he gets a call saying that his mother has just been killed by his father because his father found out that she was sending money to Alexei to fund his time at college in the US. So he invites his father to the cemetery to meet with him, and his father plans on getting him out of Russia, and that's when Alexei decides to lay everything out for his father and say that he was willing to leave and never see his father again. And that all changed the day that his father killed his mum. And so now his father is going to get everything that he deserves. And so he kills his dad and then takes over Russia. He's like, see, Dad? I can take two. And so this is the day that he officially becomes Lord Havok and transforms himself into the look that we know. In the present, Lord Havok is reminiscing on his past while staying secluded in his laboratory, while the rest of the extremists fight the Meta Militia right outside. That's when Blue Jay arrives, interrupting the fight and killing a lot of the Meta Militia members because he's there to stop Americommando. But then Monarch arrives and puts a stop to the fight, and the extremists are all tied up. But the only member of the extremists that isn't tied up is Lord Havok, and that is the member that Monarch is most interested in meeting with. But he's still secluded in his laboratory, so Monarch has to wait until he's ready to see him. Eventually, Lord Havok invites Monarch and the Meta Militia into his laboratory, where it's revealed to be completely empty. The alternate version of Superman gets in Lord Havok's face, and Lord Havok kills him. And Monarch is like, how is that possible? He's supposed to be invulnerable. And Lord Havok explains that Superman is normally invulnerable, but not while they're in this room. Because while they were busy fighting the extremists, Lord Havok was altering the room so that anyone with superpowers, they get shut off when they enter the laboratory. And at this very moment, while Monarch and the Meta Militia are being distracted by Lord Havok, the extremists free themselves, and then Lord Havok locks them in the room. So Monarch and the Meta Militia are now locked in this laboratory, surrounded by the extremists, with no powers. And the room doesn't work on the extremists, so the extremists still have their powers, while the Meta Militia and Monarch do not. Gorgon finally gets his revenge on Wandjina and eats him. It's pretty gross. Blue Jay stops the extremist from killing Americommando because he wants him to face trial and get what he deserves. And Lord Havok says, I will make you the leader of Angor as long as you promise to keep it peaceful. Otherwise, when the extremists come back, we'll make you pay. And the rest of the extremists are like, when we come back, what do you mean? And this is the moment where Lord Havok turns to Monarch and officially agrees to create an alliance with Monarch. And then the rest of the book after this spoils the ending of Countdown to Final Crisis, so I'm not going to talk about it. This is where the book officially ends for us, is Lord Havok has joined Monarch, and that's Lord Havok and the Extremists. Overall, this book is very mediocre and incredibly confusing. There are many moments where we jump between the past and future, and there were times where I got mixed up with the past and the future events. The continuity errors are also a problem, all the Jason Todd stuff not lining up with Countdown to Final Crisis. I'm curious to see if the ending to this series does line up with Countdown, because those earlier moments didn't line up at all. If you're already reading Countdown to Final Crisis and you care enough about Lord Havok and the Extremists, then I would recommend reading this just because it gives more context on those characters and their backstories. But if you're not reading Countdown to the Final Crisis and you don't care about these characters at all, I'd say don't read this because it's not very good. Though I will say Liam Sharp's art in this book is probably the highlight and maybe the only reason to read it if you only read comic books for the art. Anyway, that's going to be it for this week's episode. Next week we are going to be covering the next Countdown miniseries, which is Countdown to Mystery, which follows Dr. Fate fighting against Eclipso. So we'll be covering that next week. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode, and I'll see you then.